All right, I see those participants climbing up, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much for tuning in to our virtual Crabber workshop for the 2024 season. This is a super exciting time with crabbing season approaching, opening up on July 1st throughout much of the Puget Sound and with other areas coming up soon. My name is Haley Sherman. I'm the project coordinator for the Northwest Straits Foundation, who's hosting this event. A little bit about us. We are a nonprofit organization working to protect and restore marine resources of the Puget Sound region. And we do this through restoration projects, marine debris cleanup, such as derelict fishing gear, and a whole lot more. I'd like to take a few seconds before we begin to guide you to some valuable resources that we have on our website, which you can find at catchmorecrab.org. First, as I mentioned, we are a nonprofit, so if you would like to make a donation to support our work, you may do so by clicking on the Make a Gift button at the top of the screen there, or the Donate button on the right. As you scroll down the page, you will find instructional videos on how to properly prepare and set up your crabbing gear. And then further down, you will find some web links to and phone apps for tides, marine traffic, and rules and regulation info. So for this workshop, that we ask that you submit all your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Due to the amount of attendees, we will not be using the raise your hand or chat feature. So all questions should be directed to the Q&A function. How that will work is we will read aloud your questions to the presenters and may even answer some by typing in some answers. And after each presentation, there will be time for some question and answers, and then as well as the end. Our speakers today are Don Velasquez and Blair Winnicott from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And first, we will begin with Don Velasquez presenting on Puget Sound crab management. So I'll stop sharing my screen and go ahead and start sharing, Don, and I will introduce you. So Don holds degrees from Oregon State University and University of Washington. His graduate work involved optimizing aquaculture conditions for juvenile geoduck clams, and he has worked with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife since 1993. His early work at Department of Fish and Wildlife was with intertidal clam and oyster enhancement, and since 1995, he has been working primarily with the crab and shrimp fisheries in Puget Sound. And your screen looks great.
Excellent. Thank you, Haley. Appreciate the invite. And I think, is this the third year that we've done the workshop with the Northwest Straits? And we sure appreciate the time to get good information out to the public. It's a big fishery and a lot of education to be done, and we sure appreciate the opportunity. I know we're going to cover 3 sections in our presentation. I will cover this first section on crab management. My colleague Blair Winnicott will cover the recreational rules in the summer seasons that we've announced. And then I will take the lead on the third section, crab gear and best practices. Blair, feel free to chime in on any of these as I'm presenting, and I'll do the same for you. So without much ado, let's go ahead and get started on crab management in Puget Sound. And I will talk about management principles for Dungeness crab and red rock crab, and how the different harvest groups that are out there in Puget Sound, how we allocate the crab and the timing of harvests. These are the 2 primary targets for the crab fishery in Puget Sound. The Dungeness crab on the left. It was Cancer Magister for the longest time, and it's been reclassified new genus Metacarcinus. And the red rock crab, which is a secondary target in this fishery. And we'll talk a little bit about them, but a lot of what we'll talk about today is about Dungeness crab on the left. For Dungeness crab in Puget Sound and state fisheries, we require that people get a license, or if they're under the age of 15, they don't need a license, but they at least need to purchase the Dungeness crab endorsement for Puget Sound. That allows anyone in the recreational world to harvest Dungeness crab in Puget Sound. It's not required on the coast, notably. Every year we sell about 195,000 to 240,000 endorsements, at least in recent history. That's a huge user group. Not all these people actually go in a given year, but that's how many people purchase the endorsement with the intent to go. Catch reporting in this fishery is required via catch record cards. So similar to salmon, you are required to fill out a catch record card immediately once you retain a Dungeness crab. Same thing goes for salmon. There are two separate seasons. There's a summer reporting period and summer season, and a winter reporting period and winter season. There's separate CRCs, catch record cards for each, and you're required to submit them by 1 month after the season. And the catch record card is shown here on the right. It's a paper card currently, and you have to check off each of your crab whenever you go on a day in a different marine area. State commercial fisheries. There are state commercial fisheries in Puget Sound. I can go into where they operate in just a moment on the next slide, but it's a limited entry fishery. There are about 248 licenses. About 130 vessels participate in this fishery. They can use a maximum of 100 pots per license, but in recent years, we have been asked by the fishers themselves to limit the maximum number of pots per license to lower numbers, 30, 40, 50, just so that they can spread out their landings and get a better price for their crab. All landings must be recorded on a fish ticket. Currently, that fish ticket system has been transitioned to electronic fish tickets, and their season runs from about October 1st through April 15th. And as most people who are participating in the webinar know, the recreational fisheries commence prior to October 1st. So they're on the state side, they're the second ones in the water. Puget Sound crab regions, we have 8 management regions. Region 3 is subdivided here. Regions 1, 2 east, 2 west, and 3 and that's North Puget Sound and the Strait. They have recreational commercial harvests on the state side occurring in those regions. Regions 4, 5, 6, and 7, Central and South Puget Sound. State policy allocates the entire state share to the recreational fishery only. There is no state commercial fishery in those regions. This regional structure is used for management with the treaty tribes, who are co-managers on these resources. And the recreational marine areas are in the sport pamphlet are not the same as these regions, but they generally line up with these boundaries to some degree. So in this map, you can see these are crab management regions in Puget Sound. And again, we're only talking about Puget Sound, not the coast. And these are the marine areas that are required to be recorded on your catch record card, whether you fish for salmon or crab. And again, emphasizing that these marine areas down here, 10, 11, 12, 13, are recreational only in the state's fisheries. And then 7, 8, 1, 8, 2, 9, 4, 5, and 6, all these up here have recreational and commercial fisheries on the state side. This is a long-term plot of Dungeness crab harvests, both state and tribal, from Puget Sound since 1991 through 2022. What this intends to show is that the Rafiti decision, which reaffirmed the treaty right to harvest up to 50% of the crab, occurred right here in 94, 95. And you can see since then, there has been a discrete attempt to keep harvest sharing at 50-50. The state bars are in yellow. The treaty bars are in this blue color. The total harvest in Puget Sound is in the red for a given year. The record year is still 2015. But you can see from the early 90s, overall Puget Sound Dungeness crab harvests have gone way up. This is looking primarily at the state fisheries, both recreational and commercial, in about the same time frame. This starts in 1993. Our most current WDFW crab policy, which guides how the state's crab is partitioned between commercial and recreational, was adopted here and changed in 2010, adopted in 2011. And you can see that policy change resulted in more of an equitable sharing between the recreational and commercial state contingents in Puget Sound. It dropped off here at about this time, at least in part because all of South Puget Sound and South Hood Canal had suffered some population problems for Dungeness crab. And as a result, the recreational portion of the harvest dropped significantly here toward the tail end. Marine Area 13 is still closed, and Marine Areas 10 and 11 have limited harvest quotas currently. In terms of harvest timeline during the year, the treaty fisheries operate first in the calendar year. They typically have commercial windows that are fairly short. Again, they are co-managers and they're allowed to set their own treaty harvest times, again, to harvest their 50%. They typically have short fisheries so that it keeps the price paid for their commercial crab high. The summer recreational fishery for the state begins in July. The summer season goes through Labor Day, early September. We assess the catch from the catch record cards on the summer fishery, and then come October 1st or the first week of October, we will be assigning what remains to a winter recreational opportunity. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the state commercial fleet comes on typically October 1st and can operate in some areas into April. Tribal and state fisheries are governed by annual regional management plans that we negotiate every year. And a lot of the details about how the fishery proceeds that year are in those plans, including quotas. And the state recreational commercial season structures are governed by the WDFW Fish Commission or WDFW Commission policy. And if you go to our website, you go Puget Sound Crab Policy in the search box and you can find that policy. So how, simply put, how is the resource allocated? Here's the total quota, harvest quota for Dungeness crab in Puget Sound. There's state tribal shares. Federal court order mandates a 50-50 sharing. And then the WDFW Commission policy guides how the state's 50% is split between state commercial and state recreational. And this is the approximate shares of the pie in recent years. The management framework for Dungeness crab relies on a 3S strategy. There's a minimum size. In Puget Sound, it's 6 1/4 inches. 6 1/4 inches is measured with the crab gauge, not including the points. This provides males approximately 2 years to reproduce before they enter the fishery. Only male crab can legally be retained in the Dungeness crab fishery. It allows the females the opportunity to reproduce without harvest pressure. And the season is limited to minimize interactions with soft shell crabs, soft crabs that are legal size. And the reason for that is when they are handled repeatedly, there is a mortality involved with handling those soft shell crab, and we want to avoid that if at all possible. Again, size limit, use a crab gauge. It's the accurate way to measure. Don't use dollar bills. Don't use measuring tapes. And again, do not include this last set of points. The minimum size from here to here needs to be 6 1/4 inches in Puget Sound. It is notably different on the Washington coast and Columbia River, and you'll find in Oregon it's also 5 3/4 in the recreational fishery there. And that's using the gauge to measure the crab at the appropriate point. This crab here is barely legal size, 6 1/4. Females Female Dungeness crab have the wide flap on the abdomen. That's where they carry their eggs. We don't allow to take a female Dungeness crab in Puget Sound, and this is what the males look like. They do have a narrow abdomen because they do not carry eggs there on their underside. That's what a female Dungeness crab with eggs looks like. You typically don't see that in the recreational season in the summer, but in the winter months, November, December, you may get females with eggs on the abdomen like that in your traps. And the reasons, again, for soft shell crab being avoided and for not allowing people to keep soft shell crab currently is there's low meat yield per crab, meat quality is poor, and again, handling mortality is fairly high for soft shell crab. Here's an example of where you check a crab for soft shell. We typically push the claw in, and this is what we would call the armpit of the crab. And if that pop can's in with a slight pressure from your thumb, that is too soft to keep, and it won't have a lot of meat and will have all the other issues. If that is rock hard, rock solid, that's the prime quality crab to keep, and it'll be up to 25-26% meat by weight instead of 13-14% in a truly soft shell crab. And this was a crab that came up in a trawl, and that just illustrates how soft the shell could be early on in the soft shell period. Red rock crab management, the size limit is 5 inches. Again, you measure them in the same way. Males and females are allowed in that fishery. And again, no soft shells allowed to be taken. Again, male and female allowed. This is the female red rock. Same picture as before of a female with eggs, but this is with the red rock crab. The season structure is the same as the Dungeness crab fisheries in Puget Sound. We coincide the recreational seasons with Dungeness seasons. And again, the soft shell issue for red rock crab is the same as for Dungeness. And I guess we're ready for questions on the management.
Great, thank you. Currently, there are no questions, just a statement. So I'll give folks a second to digest this. Again, put all your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and I will read them out to the presenters. But we do have a statement that just says, you guys are awesome for doing this, and thank you. So
we appreciate that.
I'll give folks a minute or two to type their questions.
And just as an FYI, we do have a email inbox for questions that aren't covered in that seminar, which I'll show at the end of the presentation. So people, if they have them still, they can send them to us.
Awesome. We've got a couple questions now. The first question, could you describe how you measure what the size of each constituent's catch is, the tribes and commercial?
Yeah. In terms of documenting the catch for commercial harvest, both treaty and state harvests have to go on a fish ticket. In the past, that has been a paper ticket where you fill out the details of who caught the crab, who it was sold to, how many pounds, what price was paid, where it came from, and all those details are on the fish ticket. And that information gets sent to Olympia and to the Northwest Indian Fish Commission as well. For recreational crabbers, it's your catch record card. Simply put, you're required to record your catch immediately on your catch card. We do catch estimates from the catch that is reported on those cards, and we make a separate estimate for catch that isn't reported to us. It's a little bit of a lot of details go into that recreational catch estimation, which we can give people more detail on, but essentially that's what it is. We have a census of catch from the people who report cards, and we estimate the catch based on a bias correction survey for those who don't report their cards.
Great. We have two questions that are similar, so we'll answer them at the same time, or they're essentially the same question. What time of year is molting for both species?
That's a great question. Depending on the area of Puget Sound, we've noticed some differences in terms of the timing. And when I talk about differences in timing of molt of the legal size crabs, because we really don't survey the smaller crabs and when they happen to molt. Some areas are pretty cut and dry, but others like marine areas 8.1 and 8.2 and marine area 7, the timing of the major molt is, how should I say this, less distinct, blurry, and can have multiple peaks. It makes it challenging to do that 3S strategy, avoiding the soft shell. But that's a little bit of why you have different season start dates, particularly for marine area 7 as compared to the rest of the area.
Okay, we'll take one more. I've seen orange and white floats in Dungeness Bay. What do those colors denote?
Good question. If recreational compliance with the half red, half white buoy, which we'll talk about later, was 100%, I would say those probably denote some kind of treaty or state commercial gear. It may not even be crab. There's other species that use buoys like shrimp. But honestly, the recreational contingent hasn't been 100% compliant with the half red, half white buoys. And we find other non-compliant colors used. So.
Great. So we'll stop questions for this section just now, but keep them coming. We'll have more time to answer questions. We'll have Blair set up the screen here and I will introduce him. So Blair will be presenting on Puget Sound recreational crabbing regulations and seasons. Blair Winnicott is a crustacean or crab and shrimp fisheries biologist with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. His position focuses on the recreational fisheries of Puget Sound, crab and shrimp species, most notably Dungeness crab and spot shrimp. Blair supervises the crab monitoring or CREO program to collect data on catch and compliance of Puget Sound's recreational Dungeness crab fishery and promotes outreach and education.
Thanks, Haley. And hello, everybody. So I'm going to go through some of the seasons and regulations, which Dawn has mentioned a couple things, but I'm going to summarize a lot of the high points, which are good to know before going out and crab. So seasons for the recreational crab fishery in Puget Sound were announced mid-June, around June 12th. So you can find information on the seasons on the department's website. If you go to Google WDFW crab seasons and areas, you should be able to find what seasons are open and where. So the map to the right there, you can see those are the marine areas. So those are all the areas found within Puget Sound. And I have our seasons summarized in this table here. So you can see that many areas open up to crabbing July 1st, which is next Monday. And those seasons will, for most areas, will run through Labor Day, which is September 2nd of this year. And so for those areas open July 1st through September 2nd, they are open only Thursday through Monday. For a lot of those areas, that corresponds to about 46 open days of the fishery for the summer. We have other areas such as Marine Area 7 south and north, up to the north near Bellingham and in the San Juan Islands. And 7 south, that will open July 18th and will run through for the summer season through September 2nd and will be open for a winter fishery as well, guaranteed through September 30th. 7 north, the northern part of Marine Area 7 will open August 15th and run through September 30th. Several areas in Central and South Puget Sound. So Marine Area 10, that will open July 1st and run through August 26th. And same with Marine Area 11, but that will only be open on Sundays and Mondays only. So the fishery is closed, so no gear can be on the water any day that is not a Sunday or Monday. And there are several areas in South Puget Sound, what we call Marine Area 13. So that's all of the water south of the Tacoma's Narrows Bridge. That will be closed again this year. So that has been closed since 2018 due to continued abundance related closures. So there's just not enough Dungeness crab currently with our population monitoring that the department does. That's similar with Hood Canal as well, in only a southern part of Hood Canal, which we call Marine Area 12. So the area south of Ayock Point, that is also closed to crabbing. And you can see that those areas circled in red on the map there. And so we do have winter seasons, as Don announced. So if after the closing of the summer season, we will run recreational catch estimates. And if we determine there is enough quota to sustain a winter fishery, we will announce winter seasons. And typically those will run October 1st through December 31st. And you can go to the next slide, Don. So I know Don's mentioned some of these things. I'll talk about them again, hit the high points. It's important to know the harvest rules for Dungeness and red rock crab before heading out. For Dungeness crab, as Don mentioned, you can only retain males, so all females need to be released. You can tell by the abdomen size of the Dungeness crab, females will have a very wide abdomen. There is a minimum size limit, which is 6¼ inches. Again, Don mentioned that. Don't include that set of points, but it's the widest part across the carapace, 6¼ inches. It's best to use a crab gauge. If you don't have a crab gauge, I recommend you go out and get one that can measure a Dungeness crab. All soft shell must be released, so only crab that are hard shell. Don talked about poking the crab and seeing if it bends in like a soda can. And it is noteworthy that keeping claws only of Dungeness and red rock crab is illegal. So I know on the east coast of the United States, there's a stone crab fishery where you are allowed to take one claw and put the crab back. Here in the state of Washington, that is illegal. You cannot take only the claws of Dungeness and red rock crab. For red rock crab, you can retain both males and females. There is a 5-inch minimum size limit, and you can keep 6 in a day in Puget Sound as compared to Dungeness crab, where you can only keep 5. Again, all soft shell must be released, and keeping claws only of red rock crab is not allowed. It's also important to note that the back shell or the carapace must be retained with you even after your day is done crabbing until you return back to your residence. And essentially that's to prove compliance. So if you're ever contacted by enforcement when off the water, they need to be able to see the shell of the crab to determine if it was a legal size. And you can go to the next slide, Don. So to legally harvest Dungeness crab in a Puget Sound marine area, you need to have a catch record card, as Don mentioned earlier, to record each crab you retain. We use this to generate catch estimates for Puget Sound, so it's very important for us to gather this information. So we do have separate summer and winter seasons. So there are separate catch record cards issued. So there's a summer CRC, summer catch record card and a winter catch record card. So it's important to know what season you're fishing in and to make sure you have the appropriate card. So you need to record each crab kept immediately, including the month, the day, and the marine area you are harvesting your crab in, and it needs to be in pen and ink. So upon retention, you need to mark area, month, day, check mark a crab, and at the end of the day, you need to total the crab kept per day at the end of the line for the catch record card. You are also required to report your catch record cards by certain deadlines. So you can report by mail at any time prior to the deadline. So if you go crabbing in the middle of the season and you don't think you're going to go again, you can mail us your catch record card and you'll satisfy that requirement. So the mailing address to mail in your CRC is shown on your card. There is another strategy. You can submit your catch online during our online reporting period, and that online reporting period opens at the end of the summer and winter fisheries. So to submit your summer card, you can submit it for this upcoming season, September 3rd through October 1st. There is an online tool that I'll show you on the next slide where you could submit your catch. For winter, if there is a winter season, it's January 1st through February 1st of following year, 2025. And you can also drop off your card at a regional office as well. If you don't turn in your card, not only are you not giving us your information in order to generate a catch estimate, but you'll also be assessed a $10 penalty on your next year license when you purchase one. And noteworthy that you do not record red rock crab on your catch record card. There's no requirement to do that. And go to the next slide, Don. So to find more information on Dungeness Crab catch record cards, the recording and reporting, we do have a web page dedicated to this. The address shown there, you can type into Google to WDFW Dungeness Crab catch record card. It'll pop right up. It has all of the information you need to create an online account. If you haven't done one yet, to report your catch online, it'll show you where and when you need to report your card. So this is a very useful website if you need to know any of that information. Go to the next slide, Don. So a common question we get is whether crabbers that have a catch record card but did not go crabbing or were not successful, so they didn't catch any crab during the year, and they don't have any catch to report, do they still need to report their card back to the department? And the answer is yes. You still need to send us in your catch record card or report it online, even if your card is empty. So if you don't, you'll still be assessed a $10 penalty. And so this figure here just shows you the percentage of individuals that do turn in their card versus the number of crab they harvested. And so that first bar there shows that almost 50% of crabbers that have a card did not actually catch any crab. So it's a significant portion of people that submit their cards back to us don't catch crab, which we still want that information if you don't catch any crab or go crab. Go next slide, Don.
Oops, I was muted. All right, we've got lots of questions. First, we'll start with, why is 7 North given such a short season?
Yeah, so I can tackle this one, and Don, feel free to jump in as well. So this is related to the molting of Dungeness crab and when there is a high percentage of softshell crab up north. Don can speak more to why that is, but we conduct with tribal co-managers, we test for the shell hardness of Dungeness crab, and it has historically been noted that they typically don't reach at least 80% of the population up there as hard shell crab until mid-August. And that's when we open up the summer season for 7 North. And that's also another reason why we extend that season to September 30th. And Don, please add in anything.
Yeah, I will say that over multiple years of sampling, the commission wanted to set start dates for these areas that could be relatively consistent, something that people could plan on. And as a result of many years of sampling, it's not that every year the crab harden up in 7 North in mid-August, but there's enough years where that's the case, where they wanted to set the start date at mid-August so that we would have a more predictable start to the recreational season in 7. But yeah, it is different than some of the other areas to the south where clearly the 80% hard shell criteria is met before July 1.
Okay, this is in the same vein. So the map doesn't show the delineation of 7 North and 7 South. Could you please go back to that slide and describe the areas?
So here's area 7. 7 North, basically, the cutoff is, and this is on the website, the actual split of 7 into 7 North and 7 South, but all of Bellingham Bay, Padilla Bay, this area here, the San Juans, this is all considered 7 South. That's the July 18th opener this year. Everything here in Lummi Bay, Gulf of Georgia, Birch Bay, Boundary Bay is considered 7 North, and that's the mid-August start.
Crabbing used to be open year-round with a short closure during molting season, and now we get 15 days. Why?
You want to tackle that one, Don?
Yeah, I can tackle that one. Part of the answer is all of our seasons have been constricted due to the 50-50 sharing of the resource with the treaty tribes as of 1995. On top of that, the population of Western Washington who goes recreational crabbing has increased dramatically. Part of that is due to just the population increase, but part of it is also due to the fact that recreational boaters who have boats and were targeting species like salmon and had those salmon opportunities reduced, switched to other target species like crab and shrimp. And so all those factors combined have resulted in decreased seasons in all areas. Not all areas have 15-day seasons like the questioner suggested. That was what 7 North for the season, but they've all been reduced. And, you know, it is true historically, before there was 50-50 sharing agreements, the seasons were open for most of the year, except for a short time before July 15th, where pots weren't allowed.
Okay. How long does a carapace need to be retained for? A day, a week, a year, until the end of the season? Question mark.
Blair, you get this
Forever.
one.
Forever. No, just kidding. It just needs to be retained until you arrive at your residence. So when you go crabbing for the day, you're taking your crab home. That's when the carapace can be disposed of.
And that's letter of the law. That's the way the WAC is written. And it specifically says while in the field. In the field is defined in the sport pamphlet and in the WAC as being anywhere besides your permanent residence.
Question about releasing. If you discover onshore that a crab is soft, will it make it back to the deeper waters if you release it on the beach? How far can they travel on the floor bed to get to their nest?
That's
Blair,
a good question. Sure,
Go
that's a good question. Although I don't have the data to support this, they can crawl back to where they need to go. So in deeper waters, of course, the softshell crab has a higher chance of mortality just being dumped closer to shore if it needs to crawl a longer distance. So if you do discover you have a softshell crab, release it as soon as you can back into the waters that it came from, if possible.
I think we have time for one more. Yeah. Do you expect the paralytic shellfish poisoning cases on the outer coast to impact the 2024 season?
Blair, go ahead and I'll follow up.
Sure. I don't imagine so. When you see biotoxins, a lot of that is because you see a lot of the paralytic shellfish poisoning in bivalves. The crabs are occupying different habitats and likely aren't coming across the same contaminants, biocontaminants in the environment. But I'll kick it off to you, Don, if you have anything. It's a good question, though.
Yeah. Again, there's different algal biotoxins. There's the paralytic shellfish poisoning. There's also amnesic shellfish poisoning, other algal toxins, um, domoic acid. That has shut down, domoic acid has shut down the crab fishery on the coast, in part because that's where the blooms have typically happened, and the primary species that concentrates that toxin, bivalve species, is the razor clam, which Dungeness crab feed heavily on the coast. If bivalve species test hot for algal toxins in Puget Sound, I've been told by the Department of Health that they'll first confirm that those bivalves are toxic, and then they'll switch to testing crabs in that area to see if the toxin accumulated in the crab guts is above a certain acceptable level. And then potentially the Dungeness crab fishery would be affected. That hasn't happened to this point with some of these major events on the coast, but doesn't mean in the future it won't.
Great. If you still have a question in there, we will get to them at the end, but we will move on to our next presentation. Dawn is going to demonstrate how to properly set up your gear, and then we will have our final Q&A session at the end. Oh, Dawn, you're muted.
Thank you. I wanted to go over the gear that's used in the Puget Sound fishery. There's quite a variety of gear. And then I do have some live video at the end that we could show you exactly how to set it up and some of the key details. So this slide just shows you historically, there have been many methods. This is a really old picture from one of our Fish and Wildlife booklets in the past. Dip netting for crab. There are star traps that lay flat on the bottom that when you pull the line, it flips all the crab to the center. This is the more traditional commercial trap. It's heavy. It has gates and entrances like recreational traps, but it is heavier duty. Once you drop this, it tends to stay put. There are things like crab rakes, I guess. You can't actually puncture crab in harvesting, but you can sift them out of the sand. There are castable devices you can put on your fishing pole, like the crab hawk, which clamp down onto a baited a center and it allows you to reel the crab in. But by far the most common recreational traps are these lighter weight, foldable crab trap designs that make up probably 75% of recreational crab traps that are used. And so there are some definite gear requirements that have to be incorporated into a trap by law. Number one, if you leave your gear unattended, which most people do when they fish traps, you have to attach a half red, half white buoy with your first name, last name, and full address on the buoy. And that's a requirement. It's been a requirement for some time. You have to attach your buoy to your crab trap with a line that is either weighted, if you're using a floating line, which most people don't anymore. Most people use a leaded line, a sinking line, so they don't have to add this weight. I can show you examples of the lines that are used. The traps, anything that doesn't lie flat on the bottom is considered a crab pot or shellfish pot. And you have to have 2 4¼ inch minimum inside diameter escape rings in the upper half of the pot. This allows smaller crab and a lot of female crab to come and go. So essentially your crab trap is a feeding station for the non-target crabs. Every crab pot, shellfish pot, has to have a biodegradable device. In this case, in the diagram is shown here, it's a 100% natural fiber cord, cotton, jute, twine, that when it rots away will allow a 3 by 5 inch opening for the crabs that are inside the trap to get out and escape. If you don't have something like this incorporated in your trap, what happens is the crabs get caught in there, they die, it becomes bait for more crabs to come in, and it just ends up being a killing machine, which is the reason why you have to incorporate that. The minimum mesh size for crab traps is 1½ inches on the trap. The total volume is 13 cubic feet or less. There's some recommendations about what to put in the crab traps. It's advised strongly for these very light designs that you add weight to the trap. In this case, it's showing these holy bricks in the corners. I'll show you some other weights that can be incorporated into lighter trap designs. It's recommended to use a rugged bait container. The idea is to keep the bait in the center of your trap and keep that bait from walking away with the crabs. It allows your trap to fish more efficiently. The flags and staff shown here on number 9 will help you stand out in terms of the recreational buoys deployed in an area. Ideally, you would want to mark the location of where you set your trap with your GPS unit in today's world, but you can also make it more distinct to yourself by adding this flag and staff, and people are very creative, and when they add this feature to their buoy setups, it just makes it easier to find yours in a mass of buoys. Some other supplies you want to remember when you go crabbing, things that people often forget. Bring the sport fishing rules pamphlet with you. Right now, it's the tail end of the current pamphlet, and come July 1, a new pamphlet is in effect. You'll want to get that from your license dealer or a Fish and Wildlife office. You want to have your license, pen, and catch record card. Again, you need these things when you go out and harvest Dungeness crab. And always fill out your card as soon as you keep a crab and before you reset the pot. Letter of the law. Crab caliper, you want to bring something to measure your crab, 6¼ inch for Dungeness, 5 inch for red rock. I'll show you examples of those calipers. Don't forget your bait. I mean, a crab trap that's not baited doesn't catch many crab. I would hesitate to say it doesn't catch any because I've seen crab traps catch crab that weren't baited, but I would suggest using bait. Mackerel, sardines, salmon, clams, squid, all these things work as bait. And this is often forgotten, but once you catch your crab, you'll want to have some kind of way or container to keep your crab cool and alive. The best way to do that is soaked burlap or towels in seawater in an ice chest with ice or cold packs. That will keep your crab alive and in good condition. Simply throwing them in a bucket with some seawater with no aeration with a bunch of other crabs on a warm day will kill the crab. And these are just tips to improve your catch. Add weight to the entry gates. When you fish traps in areas with strong currents, what happens is those strong currents will push the gates open and the crab may escape when those gates are flying open in the current. Traps with ramps at the entry tunnels tend to hold the crab better than those without, just something to note. So if you're going to leave your trap out there for a while and fish it for a while, it's good to have trap designs that have ramps. Inspect your traps for holes and malfunctioning gates before you deploy. Nothing's worse than putting your trap out and finding, oh, my gates were stuck in the up position, and so the crab just came and went. Use the durable bait containers. Again, you don't want your bait to be removed from the center of your trap. That's where it's most effective. Change your escape cord when needed and check it often. It's required on traps, and you want it to work when you lose a pot for whatever reason, but you don't want to lose your catch just because you haven't changed your escape cord after some use. Attach the bait to the center trap, like I said before. Be willing to try different depths. If you're not catching crab at a shallow depth, change the depth to something slightly deeper. And that does tend to produce, particularly as you go away from the start of summer season, where the large Dungeness crab are in the shallows mating in June, they tend to move to deeper water later in the season. And I wanted to quickly show you some of the lessons we've learned about gear loss and how to set up gear properly from the closed day sweeps. Just so everyone is aware, WDFW does go out on the closed days, and any traps that are visible as buoys on the surface on the closed days are collected. For those people who have properly labeled their buoys, we send them postcards, try to get them their traps back. And we try to make the assumption that they simply lost their gear in the currents. For those people who didn't label their gear correctly with the proper buoy, they honestly aren't going to get notified. And so they won't be given the opportunity to get their traps back. These photos just show you the degree to which these closed day sweeps collect gear. And it's a substantial amount of pots, and some of the graphs that I'll show you how many pots we do pick up on closed days. How do traps become derelict? There's a variety of different ways. Traps can be set too deep. Sometimes the sand and sediment at a river mouth will bury a trap, and the average recreational person trying to pull it won't be able to get it off the bottom. This is a big one. There was some news today about a ferry that hit a crab trap. Buoys and lines are struck by vessels, barges, and log rafts. Buoys and lines can get tangled in woody debris or kelp. A lot of our rivers flush out trees, and kelp moves around with the tides, and sometimes that will drag the line and buoy down. Owners forget where they placed them. Again, use a GPS unit if you can. And all these other things, tying a knot that doesn't work, and some of the less common ones like ice flows during the wintertime will sometimes lock in a buoy and drag it away, or malicious sabotage or cutting of buoys does occur. This just shows you how many crab traps WDFW removes on closed days, and it's in the neighborhood of 12 to 1,400 traps in more recent years. That's a lot of crab traps. Most of these people think they've been stolen. When they find that we have recovered them with buoys on the surface on a closed day, they're actually surprised. And what we find is there's a lot of reasons that might be contributing to this. Again, when you look at the style of the crab traps that are recovered on these closed days, by far it's the square light folding traps here in blue that we recover. Some of the problems that we see with those traps, one big problem is the buoys are attached incorrectly. I think that's an appreciated contributor to crab trap loss, and I can show you pictures of that. These are some buoy setups that we would consider the buoys attached incorrectly, and buoys are designed to have the round part of the buoy here facing down toward the trap, not facing up toward the top of the staff. The reason why you don't put the flat part of the buoy down toward the trap is it catches kelp and snags on woody debris and is more drag in the current. So flip this buoy over and this would be correct. People do this weird thing where they attach any piece of foam they find. Again, this buoy in a current would drag one of those lighter trap designs away because of the increased drag of that buoy right there. And it's illegal to use empty jugs and containers, in part because they partially fill with water, and tying them on sideways to a buoy like this. These are all examples of improper attachment of buoys. That just increases the chance that that gear would be lost. Unweighted traps, that's the other big problem. Of the traps that we recover on closed days, 60% this last year were unweighted. They need some additional weight so that the currents don't drag them away. Luckily, floating line is not a big problem. It's still a minor problem in these recoveries. Floating line tends to be that yellow polypropylene stuff as opposed to the leaded line that's more commonly used. And how do we maximize escapement from traps that are lost? Use that required escape cord. You can use smaller cord than what's allowed by law. I think we package up a lot of 60 thread size 60 cotton cord in our educational packets. And there's different ways to incorporate in the traps that I'll show you. The most effective ways are to tie up the whole side of the trap with 3 loops of cord or tie in an escape ring. And I can show you examples of this. This is the escape ring tied in with rot cord. When this trap is lost, the escape ring will fall down and let the trap crabs out. This is the same example with an escape ring that was tied in at the top of the trap that fell out with crabs escaping. And this is another place where rot cord can be incorporated at the top of the trap. It's not as effective according to some of the studies we've looked at, but it still allows the top of the trap to open, allows crabs to escape. Any questions?
All right. Let's start with, if we leave buoys, do you only check them Thursday through Monday or the days of the season, etc.? Do you have to remove them Monday through Wednesday?
Yeah, that's a good question. Blair, you can chime in anytime as well. You are allowed to leave your traps out overnight. They cannot be out on the water on any closed day. So for example, on a Thursday through Monday open period, you can put your trap out on Thursday, leave it out overnight. You can't be checking your pot during the nighttime, but you can leave it out overnight and come back the next day, remove the illegal crab, rebait it, put it out again, leave it out overnight again. But when you get to the Tuesday, before Tuesday, it better be out of the water. And then you can put it back in on Thursday. But you are allowed to leave them out overnight. Just the reason why you can't check them during the nighttime hours in a boat is because of the thievery problem.
Okay, and we'll do one more because you still need to do the demonstration, Dawn,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
One more. So what happens to the derelict gear once it's recovered? Is there a way for crabbers to purchase the gear instead of buying new gear?
Good question there. The gear that's in horrible shape, not even usable shape, that does not go back to the owners, gets recycled. The gear that is in decent shape, that is not returned to the owners because they didn't label their buoys correctly, gets donated to nonprofit organizations like Jefferson County Search and Rescue, Salmon for Soldiers, Power Squadrons. These are just some of the examples. Boy Scouts. and they get donated. So for example, if you wanted to pick up this gear from Jefferson County Search and Rescue, at least once, maybe twice a year, they have an auction that they put on their website, crab gear auction, and it supports a lot of their work.
Great. So we can set up the demonstration now. We will still do some more questions at the end though.
That sounds good. I'm moving my all right. How's that?
Can you move the camera down just a smidge? We can't see the whole pot there.
Certainly.
Yeah, there we go. That's perfect.
Yeah. This is just an example of a lighter weight recreational pot, a typical one. In this case, I'll point out some of the key features. If you're leaving this unattended, half red, half white buoy with your full name and address. It needs to be attached to your trap. round end down toward the trap. That's the way you do it. Do not attach it this way. That will maximize drag. This is leaded line. This is what most people are using and what we suggest using. If you see someone using line that is like this yellow polypropylene, this floats. This will float at the surface, and this will create problems, get caught in boat propellers. So if you do use this, which we do not recommend, you have to attach a line weight to it and make sure that it sinks so it doesn't spool at the surface. A lot of these recreational traps will have a harness. When you pull trap up, it keeps it nice and square, and the crabs stay inside. In this design, the escape cord is here on the lid. So if this pot was lost, this cord would rot away, and theoretically the crab could get this open and push this out of the way. Here are the gates on the crab trap. There's 4 on this design. They're one-way gates. They allow the crab to come in. They get trapped inside when they're feeding from the bait cage in the middle. Again, you don't want the bait cage to be near the side or block the traps or the entrances, or be able to be in the top corner where the crab can work out it from the outside of the trap. This design has 2 4¼ inch escape rings, as we talked about. These are very essential to making this an effective sorting mechanism to keep legal size crab, lets the undersized crab and females out. You don't want to catch them anyway or handle it. The weights have been incorporated in this trap here. There's 4 of them in the corners of the trap. That's just one way to do it. There's many other ways to incorporate weight to the trap. Without that weight, this trap in a heavy current might not be where you left it. And for anyone who likes to learn more about the dangers of putting a crab trap out without weight, there's a YouTube video called How to Lose Your Crab Trap. I can't say the agency sponsored the video. There's a bad word in it, but it was done by someone whose trap we recovered, and as a service to us, made a very entertaining video about how to lose your crab trap. So that's the standard recreational pot. Again, I wanted to show you some other types of weights that people sell that can be incorporated in the pot. People use bricks, people use rebar, a lot of different things to add weight to the pot. Another style of pot that's used in the fishery is this commercial style pot. It's patterned after a round commercial pot, but it's lighter. Again, showing you the elements of a standard crab pot. The escape cord here is on this strap on the bail door. If this rots, when the pot is lost, they'll still flip open and let the crab out. This has been modified with some bungees here at the hinge to do just that. Again, here are the entrances coming in from the side, one-way gates. There is a ramp in this style, so the crab come through the gate and fall into the pot. This pot will hold crab longer. It's another way to incorporate a bait container. This is a standard bait jar. A lot of the commercial folks use this. Some recreational folks use this as well. You can hang it in the center of the pot, and it's very durable. Just want to make sure you don't block the entrances. This pot design also has 2 4¼ inch escape rings, again, to allow the sorting of the legal size from everything else. I wanted to show you that a lot of people have crab lines bundled up and ready to go. It's a good idea to measure them beforehand and mark them in some way. That way, when you set your pot and you think it's a 60-foot line and it's actually not a 60-foot line, you don't end up losing your gear. This is another typical buoy setup that uses 2 red and white buoys. Again, as long as one of the round ones is facing the pot, this one works pretty well. It adds a little extra flotation in height. And this one just shows the flag and staff that can be personalized so that you can find your red and white buoy in amongst all the sea of others that are out there. Again, that's another kind of pot. I have an example of some of the things that are not pots. Anyone who crabs from a pier, again, might use something like this. This is a ring net. It's 2 weighted hoops and some kind of bait holding device in the center. It fishes lying flat on the bottom and then only captures crab when you pull it up and bring it to the surface, makes a big basket. There are different rules that apply. There's no mesh size rule that applies to ring nets. If you do tie this off at a pier and leave this ring net unattended, just like the pots, you need to have a buoy with your full name and address on it. Most people don't know that. If enforcement encounters stuff just tied off to a pier with no one around and it doesn't have a buoy on it, they will confiscate it. Again, some of the other things that are helpful to have when you're crabbing, I'm going to just show you a few more things. Nice to have a pair of pliers in case you need to do anything for your trap. This is the current sport pamphlet. A new one's coming out in a couple of days. Have the regulations. A couple of the crab gauges that you see. This one is a plastic version. They do break. But this one also has a clam gauge built in. This does not have a red rock crab measurement on this gauge. There are some metal versions of crab gauges that have the 5-inch, 5 3/4, 6 and 6 1/4 inch measure. These are a little bit more durable, and some of our field crews are using these. Question that always comes up is on your buoy, can you have more than one name on the buoy? Regulations say no. Only one name and address on the buoy. So the question comes up, what if I have a friend come from out of state and I want them to use one of my buoys? Then a good way to do that, you're going to loan them your gear. They have to have their name and address on the buoy. Take some white duct tape, do it over the top, label it with their information. Enforcement has told me that that's a viable way to meet the letter of the law. Again, anytime out in the water, only 2 pieces of gear can have your name and address on it. That's the way they can tell you're complying with the 2 units of gear per rule limit. And that's all gloves. Handy thing to have. If you're handling crab, and particularly if you're not good at handling crab and you don't want to bleed on things, it's a good idea. And that's all I have, Haley.
Great. We've got lots of questions. Thanks for staying on, everybody. We'll start right at the top. I live right on the west shore of Point Roberts and will at times see sport fishers crabbing out of season. Is it okay to call this into your office? I have done so in the past.
I might even know who's submitting this question. Yes, it is. And typically, if I get reports like that or any like the Mill Creek office staff, then we forward it directly to our enforcement programs. We have different marine detachments that, depending on where that report's coming from, we will let them know.
What factors contribute to molting?
I'll answer this one, then Blair, you can fill in your thoughts. Molting is a required thing for crab to grow. Unlike crab, we don't molt and we just grow continuously. They do it in stages, and so once they've reached a certain amount, stored up enough energy to proceed to the next stage, they'll basically start robbing their old shell of the mineral component, and then it will split and they'll back out of their old shell. Their new shell has already started underneath. It's like a parchment. They'll swell it out with water and then start hardening that new shell. This time of year, we get lots of reports of dead crabs, mass mortalities on the beach, when actually it's a lot of molted shells. Those crab are still alive. They're just bigger and softer. I don't know what counts. Anything to add there, Blair?
No, I think you nailed it.
Yep.
All right, not a crab question, but when are they going to allow the sport fish catch record card to be submitted online like for crab? Anything I cannot do online is likely not going to happen in my world. Thanks.
Good question. That's a bit frustrating for our catch record card unit to have different ways of reporting for crab versus the other CRC species. If they had their way, it would be the same. But I really can't offer you a date on when the finfish part of our world will change to that option. Sorry.
I have heard anecdotally that the spot shrimp harvest was low in my area, which is 8-2.
Mhm.
8-2. Yep. More dates keep on being added. Is there any reason to believe that this is a signal for the crab harvest in the same area?
It doesn't seem to be congruent with crab, and same thing happens in Hood Canal. South Hood Canal, there's like fantastic spot shrimp harvests, and Dungeness crab's closed. In 8182 this year, preseason test fishing showed double the legal size minnow crab of last year. And yet the spot shrimp catches have been yeah, it hasn't been great. So they don't seem to correlate well in our experience.
We have two questions that are essentially the same, so this answer will answer both. How long does it take for an escape cord to degrade? How long can a crab live in an abandoned pot before escaping?
That's a great question. Depending on the condition of the crab, I imagine that second answer will vary quite a bit, and I don't think I have a good information or data to show. The largest size of cotton escape cord, when we tested that with some partners out in Port Townsend, was about 15 weeks for thread size 120, which is the maximum size of natural cord. We, in our education packets and when we work with collaborators like the Northwest Straits to put escape cord in people's hands so they can use it on their traps, we use thread size 60 or 30, and it would be much less than 15 weeks to rot away.
Where is a good place for a beginner to start?
To learn about crabbing? Ah,
Or maybe two crab.
two crab.
Yeah.
You know, I have to pump up the two reliable source of information that I can think of, which are our website and Northwest Straits. So I'm throwing a plug for you as well. But there are a lot of other great videos that I've seen on YouTube, you know, area specific on strategies and for harvest. Just be aware that some of those people who produce those videos haven't fully read the regulations. And so you're always responsible for following the regulations that are on our website and in the sport pamphlet. So that's why I always have to steer you there first.
Great. And this is our last question. What should I do if I suspect that my pots are being pulled while I'm away from them?
Definitely report it. If you can be a good witness, if you can get good information on what boat is doing it, when they're doing it, how they're doing it, who it is. If we get enough of those reports to our enforcement program, they have ways of getting to the bottom of that. And just one that's used recently, and I think I can talk about now because the case is closed. They did mark some gear by putting trackers on buoys, stage buoys. And they did find that culprit was stealing multiple people's gear and reselling. And that boat is in our back lot seized right now. So yeah, if you know of things happening, report with as much detail as you can, and it will help focus our enforcement efforts like that.
Great. And then whoever asked where is a good place to start, someone said Wet Dog Boats is helping to get new crabbers on the water in Port Angeles. So
Oh, good to know.
yes.
I haven't been out to Port Angeles lately, but we have a Fish and Wildlife office in Port Townsend, and we have a small satellite office that our fishery samplers use in Port Angeles. So.
Great. Well, I think that's it for questions. So thank you so much for coming and giving us so much information. And thank you everyone for attending tonight. This is recorded and will be sent as a link to anybody that attended or wasn't able to attend. So
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we wish everybody a happy crabbing season.
Yes. And again, if you have questions or observations during the crab season that you want to share with Fish and Wildlife, PS recreational crab at dfw.wa.gov. And we'll get it.
We can send that out in an email as well.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Dawn and Blair.
Yes, thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yes. Bye.